is challenging B. Lepisto Kirtley in the Rivanna District for Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. This is, I have said this many times on this network, including yesterday. I think there's going to be two competitive races, two of them, and it's TJ and Lepisto Kirtley. She's the incumbent. I think that race is going to be tight. And Dr. Meg Bryce and Allison Spillman for the at-large seat on the Albemarle County School Board. I'm a straight shooter. That's why you guys watch the program. I think the other races, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone, I think the other races are going to be slam dunks for the Dems. But I think these two are going to be competitive. And I'm going to say this when the show starts and the cameras go on. One of the value propositions or advantages that I think TJ has in this race is the fact that he has 27 years of tenure in Albemarle County. 27 years. That speaks for itself right there. Considerably longer than his opponent, who is newish to Albemarle County after moving from California. J-Dubs, my friend, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Viewers and listeners, ask questions, chime in with questions. Share the show, like the show, retweet the show. Vanessa Parkhill is watching in Earlysville. Jesse Rutherford, Nelson County Board of Supervisor. Kyle Irvin, Bob Yarborough in the Samuel Miller District. Marquise Johnson, Bellamy Brown, who ran for House of Delegates. Travis Hackworth is watching. Aaron King is watching. The Queen of Scottsville, one of Western Albemarle High School's finest graduates. Scott Aaronworth in Virginia Beach. Travis Hackworth in Danville. Jamie Turner in Culpeper. Juan Sarmiento of Charlottesville area, lead technician with Charlottesville Area Transit. Mark Glickman, hello. Chad Wood, hello. Dave Warwick, what's up, dog? I had one of your beers last night, the King of Clouds. It was fantastic. Richard Allen Fox, hello. Welcome to the show. We can start, my friend Judah, when you are ready. Like the show, share the show. If you want to give TJ props, I will literally mention your props live on air. If you have a question for TJ, I will mention it live on air. J-Dubs, we can rock and roll. Roger Voisinay, hello and welcome to the program. We can rock and roll when you are ready, sir. Good Wednesday afternoon, guys. I'm Jerry Miller, and this is the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We are live anywhere you get your social media. We archive the show anywhere you get your social media and on ilovecville.com. It's a show that's long-form content, so it can't get taken out of context. I mean, this is not a 15-second or 30-second soundbite. You have context on everything we talk about on this program. Today's show, I think, is going to be dynamite, man. TJ Fadley is in the house. He is running for Board of Supervisors. He's I'll straight up say it. I think what Albemarle County needs, you have a small business owner, you have a family man, you have a dude with 27 years of tenure in Albemarle County, and a guy that's running on a platform that really resonates with me as a small business owner, as a family man myself, a platform of common sense that's looking to keep more of the dollars and cents are hard-earned. I mean, I bust my tail here 80 hours a week in this building. Everyone's like, what's it like to be a business owner? Jerry, you got it good. Dude, I'm not going to complain, and I will never complain. We're very blessed, my wife and I. But working 7 days a week is something that is done on the regular. Even if you're not in the office, you're thinking about the business in some capacity. So that's very much the life of a small business owner, which we'll talk about with TJ. This show is dynamic and interactive where you, the viewer and listener, can give TJ props or ask him questions. And I see about a dozen questions already on the show for TJ. Why don't we go studio camera, then two shot, and welcome TJ to the program. You're on camera. Albemarle County is your audience. Central Virginia is your audience. Anyone's your audience. TJ, thank you for joining us. Introduce yourself to everyone that's watching the program.
So, Jerry, thank you for having me. Still kind of getting over the nerves of the public engagement. It's something that I know I'll be signing up for a lot of. It's a pleasure. I've been watching your show for a little over a year and a half.
Oh, thank you.
Great place to grab local knowledge and local news. A little bit about me. So moved here from south of Dallas back in 1997. Attended Albemarle High School. Had to move to Monticello the following year because I was an underclassman. That was the first year of it opening up. My senior year of high school, got emancipated, moved out on my own, and ended up transferring back to Albemarle, which is where I graduated. Like you said, I've been here 27 years. You know, I've had the pleasure of calling Albemarle my home, which one thing I love about it is the beautiful four seasons and mountains. You don't get that on the plains down south of Dallas. You get hot and cold. As you said, father of three that I'm raising in the county, with my beautiful wife of going on 18 years in August. I've been managing my father's dealership with him, which now I'm part owner of since, I would say, 2003, and have been one of the administrators for the last 10 years with him. One of the biggest things, like you said, that I think about is, you know, although I work 6 days a week, and that's what my typical schedule is, which equates to about a 57 to 67 hour week minimum. One of the number one things we worry about is, on average, I have 25 to 28 employees. You know, you lay down at night, you think about making sure you can come through for those people and their family, you know, the people who depend on your business to survive and for the income that helps support their households. One of the reasons why I was compelled to run was not only because of my business and my family and friends, is because of just the recent taxation trend that seems to be steadily increasing over the last 3 to 4 years. It seemed more drastic to where, as I was studying, and I've been deep diving into so much, getting ready for this position that I'm signing up for, trying to familiarize myself with the committees and policies and planning and the budget. And one of the things that I've noticed is the drastic increase on my housing, my home assessments. You know, the home assessments drastically raised the Rivanna district by 15%, you know, which since 2017 when we built our home, I think it's just shy of about $1,800 increase in my annual taxes that has occurred over the last 3 years. And I mean, I'm the median household. You know, I looked at the Census Bureau. I'm 41 years old. My income is right along the median income of the, you know, the standard house in Albemarle County. And with 3 children and my wife at home, you know, we're scraping to make ends meet for groceries and gas and, you know, simple things like that, to where these increases have taken quality of life choices that we would like to make for our children and ourselves, and it's made us have to reduce those just to make sure we can stay in the county and continue to call it our home. So one of my main platforms is trying to get in there and create some reasonable tax and spend policies for the county. I was just perusing the 2024 budget that they're proposing, and I see it's only about $150 million increase in expenditures over the last, what I call the last normal budget, which was 2019, which was just shy of $400 million, about $398 million. My biggest logic is there's got to be some savings in there somewhere that we can find to make normal people's lives a little bit more affordable. You know, you get a lot of these proposals come in from county staff, which from what I've read, about 65% of them live in bedroom counties. So if you're working in the county and you can't afford to live in the county you're working in, you know, I think another part of my platform I'd really like to push would be engaging the community in how their money's being spent, you know, and how it's being taken. I don't see much of that from our current Board of Supervisors. I would like to engage, you know, figure quarterly newsletters. So one thing I've been learning as I've been delving into campaigning, which is something I'm completely new at, but I think I'm hitting the ground running, and I'm pretty quick on the uptake. One thing I've learned is that the direct mailers that can be offered to a candidate are relatively inexpensive. How could we not send out a quarterly newsletter letting county residents know what plans we have with their tax dollars, how they plan to spend, when they can show up and have a public debate on that? You know, try to actually engage. I mean, the county's website talks about engaging community, but in all of my years here, you have to flip over rocks to find out where you can engage. You can go to the website if you happen to know where a community advisory committee is, or one of the other committee meetings that are going on, taking place, to dictate as to how the funding will be allocated and how it would be spent. But I don't see a direct reach from the board on behalf of their constituents on how our money's being spent. So I'd like to be the guy that, since in my years of business, I've gotten very comfortable at having uncomfortable conversations as management.
Well said. Yeah.
As management. Plus, I trained jiu-jitsu in town here at Gracie, Charlottesville. What's that?
At Brett Miller's gym?
At Brett Miller's gym, Gracie, which great group of guys.
Yeah.
Great ownership, great coaches. We get a lot of the intel and a lot of the first responder communities. I'm 100% in support of all of those guys, great community members. But one thing that training has taught me is how to put myself in an uncomfortable position. Along with my years of admin and management and customer service, I believe it's given me a good disposition to sit in those rooms, to have those uncomfortable conversations, so we can come up with amicable trade-offs on behalf of the taxpayers. I'd like to be that taxpayer advocate that I don't see on our board of supervisors.
I respect that. Let me jump in here.
Yes, please.
You're getting props from a lot of people. First, let's go to the better half. Chelsea in the house. She's watching the program. The family watching you. She says, so proud of you, my husband. Go get him. Chelsea, I can already tell that you're an amazing better half. The rock and foundation of this family. I got one just like you at home, and folks do not realize this. TJ and I cannot do the stuff we do professionally without a strong superhero foundation wife and mom at the house. My wife literally right now, I mentioned this to TJ, is balancing a laptop, doing some work for this business while taking care of an almost 8-month-old and a 5-year-old that goes 1,000 miles all the time. TJ's getting props from Linda. I might mess your last name up here, Linda. Linda Bonke.
That's my mother.
Oh, welcome. She's watching the program right now.
She lives south of Austin, so.
We love you, Linda. Welcome to the show. Katie Pearl has got a question and some props for you that I'm going to throw on air. Roger Voisinay. A lot of people watching here. I want to throw a couple things to this guy. Common sense. He uses that phrase on his website. He uses it in describing his platform. He talks about keeping our hard-earned dollars in our pocket. And his story he told about groceries and making ends meet, I think so many of us can relate to that in Central Virginia right now. A 6-figure salary, $100,000, whatever it may be, for a median income household in Albemarle County, that's what it is. That does not go nearly as far as it did before COVID, just 4 years ago. So I want to throw this to you here. Assessments you brought up. We know assessments in Albemarle County are tied to market value. So there's little control the assessor can do when it comes to assessments. But what the Board of Supervisors can do is the tax rate, the real estate tax rate, and jiggle that a little bit. I also was, I'm going to use the phrase appalled that the tax rate was not prioritized and dropped with assessments how they've been upticking. And I'm also been appalled that they haven't prioritized incremental tax revenue in Albemarle County, new sources of tax revenue outside of rooftops and vehicles that gentrify all of us out of the county we love to call home. Anywhere you want to go on these topics.
So I'm glad you brought that up. When it comes to tax rates and assessments, there was a statement made by the incumbent that I'm running against that said that they have no control over the assessments, which I agree 100%. They have no control over those assessments. One thing they do have control over is the tax rate, as you stated. So the county has to notify the public, which I was reading the 2019 plan guide or notice guide, which states that 30 days prior to the public hearing that can take place to vote on what they're going to do with that year's annual tax rate has to be advertised in one circulated newspaper 30 days prior to that public forum. I agree that they follow the rule of the law there, but I don't think that's enough. How are busy people who are scraping to make ends meet, trying to maintain their households, how are they going to know any better if they're not grabbing the daily progress, which, is now on a 3-time-a-week circulation. So
through the post office.
Through the post office,
Yeah.
which as a business owner, not to knock on federal entities, but the post office has let us down many a times in our years. So, and not to knock any of the hardworking people trying to make it happen, but that, again, just goes to show you how government bureaucracy runs as opposed to the potential of a privatized institution like
Give them props for that.
UPS
Dude, that just
or
gave me the
FedEx.
goosebumps right there. Keep going.
So back to what you were saying is government is a business like no other business. My business, if I choose to squander the money that we generate, that's our priority. If the government, on the other hand, is in the business of simply taking tax revenue out of the pockets of people who earn it. Now, I'm not opposed to taxation in the paid goods we receive as long as they are, well organized and well executed paid goods. And I'm all in on paying our fair share, but our fair share is the key. As I said, it seems like our expenses are kind of running away from us. If you go to the county's website and you look at their 5-year projections, they're spending $30 million more than what they plan to bring in. Somebody should be having a red light going off on that, going, hey guys, we should really figure out where the allocations are, I know you made mention of the Rivanna Futures project, which, look, I'm not opposed to because, again, I train with a lot of those guys. They bring great people, great income to the community, remarkable economic drive. That's if they plan to stay in this county. But due to the fact that our county is a higher taxed county, what's to say they don't want to commute 30 minutes and fall into a county that's a little bit more fiscally responsible with their funding? Again, and I'm all encouraging on the concept of free enterprise and, private-public partnerships. But again, and I know it's still early stages, the due diligence. But as you'd stated, and I understand they're probably paying, market value, but if you look at the county GIS, it looks like they paid 2.5 times more than what they assess it as.
I'll give some background here. Albemarle County, in a very clandestine deal, the government, the Board of Supervisors, acquired 462 acres of property along Route 29 North, adjacent to Rivanna Station. $58 million, the purchase price. $58 million. Now, the foundation of this deal, this land acquisition, was to keep the defense sector, the many different National Ground Intelligence Center, Defense Intelligence Agency, the alphabets, as Scott Morse likes to describe it. Scott's watching right now. He says, go get him, TJ. The idea is to keep the defense sector locally, and by purchasing this land, there's a potential permanent home for the alphabets, for the defense sector in Albemarle County. That's what we're talking about. Jump in.
So, yeah, and again, I believe that it is, I believe that the deal could be a sound investment. And I encourage maintaining a relationship and trying to foster a greater relationship with our defense sector. That's not what I'm speaking out again. And I will parrot you when I say hats off to Wendell Wood and his organization.
Oh, yeah. He crushed it.
Because he crushed it. And,
Yeah.
from one businessman to another, hats off.
Right.
I agree with you. I'd love to sit and have a beer because I'm pretty sure there's something I could gain from just a simple conversation with the man.
I hope I'm in that conversation too. There's no doubt about it.
I would
we
love
both
it.
gain something.
Well, and you've got to look back at, Wendell Wood and his family and his organization have had such a drastic economic impact in developing our community. Thankfully, I'm not speaking out against the deal. And I know they're still waiting on the due diligence in the process, and I know, there might be a possibility of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership to come in and maybe fund some of that, which would be nice because that would help soften the blow on behalf. And again, still waiting on the details to come through because at a first glance, it looks like the county executive and the crew that put this together were kind of looking for like an attaboy. Why is the county so alone on this? Why haven't we engaged with more state partnership to try to make sure that, that this risk, which should bring reward, because there's no reward without risk. I do understand that. There's an old business saying, scared money doesn't make money. So again, I'm not opposed to fostering this relationship, and I'm not opposed to the extra economic drive that it can bring because, hey, those are tax dollars that can help soften the blow on average households. But to me, it just, it's quite speculative at the moment. So again, I'd like to wait to see what the details prevail on that. Other things, and one of the reasons why I segued to that is because you hear a lot of clamor about new schools. And if the county's investing in projects like this, where does that leave us on the capital improvement that we need for these new schools as the county grows? I was just reading an article in the Progress about some schools are over-enrolled, some schools are under-enrolled, and I believe they're through August they're going to be having a process of working through to see how they can eliminate some of the overcrowding by filling in some of the under-enrollment, and they're looking to try to slow down the possibility of splitting up, lifelong friends, going from one element.
It's a big deal.
Which it is, because, my son, as he left Stony Point Elementary to go to Lakeside, a lot of his good friends ended up going to, I believe, Buford is the school they
I'm definitely going to ask you about that rebranding of schools.
So you asked me.
We don't have to go now if you don't want to.
Well, I'm not going to go too far down a rabbit hole, but that
Okay.
right there, you asked me, is a waste of tax revenue. It's a waste. Now, I think I did watch the show with Meg Bryce. She made a point, which I'll kind of leave it at, is the whole Virginia Murray. So the whole concept of equity, which I love the idea of equity, and I love the idea of diversity. I've had a diverse friend group my entire life. I'm 41 years old, born in 1982. I'm a Valentine baby, so the hearts behind me, they're perfect. I've always looked at things through the lens of love. Growing up in Texas, at many a Baptist sermon, you've heard the old, love your neighbor the way you love yourself. That's the way our mother always taught us, and that's the way we always try to look at it. It's the way I'm teaching my children. I will teach my children to love your children regardless of what they look like.
Respect.
And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in to each his own. One of my biggest premises of my campaign is I want you to have the freedom to live your life the way you want. I just think you could do better with more of your hard-earned income on making the choices for your quality of life. The county has a lot to say about equity and diversity, but in my business, which if you don't know, I run Freebridge Auto Sales, everybody rides. I'm sure you see me in the commercials.
One of the best taglines legitimately in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Everyone knows the tagline, everybody rides. Everyone knows this tagline.
And my father was very smart to have it trademarked back in, I think, 95, early 95, because we've had many of people try to steal it. But one of the things my dealership does is it is a niche market that helps subprime financing happen for people who need that help. My favorite saying, which I've got a great clientele base, some of the realest people, some of the greatest conversations I've had in my 20 years. One of my favorite lines is, bad things happen to good people all the time. Unfortunately, there are not many institutions like ours that will take a chance on giving somebody that opportunity to get going. So I'm all about second chances, and I'm all about equity. And of course, I know, we are a profitable business and we are a high-risk business. So we do have to run with the margins we do. But one thing I've learned is I have a lot of people who are entangled in government systems. Single mothers, for instance, which I complain about. And I know I won't have any say of this on the Board of Supervisors. And, maybe if I get into a state level or something along that nature, I never planned to be a career politician. I always thought you should do your job, go back to work as the way it's intended. But while dealing with single mothers through the years, you look at these programs, and if a single mother is making a certain amount of income, they will give a certain amount of entitlements or a certain amount of benefits. And if that single mother makes $2,000 more than that cap, they snatch them all away. You ask me, that's a government system that has a ceiling, not a launch pad. Why would you not elevate that young lady as she elevates herself to better her household? Tier her off of the benefits that she's requiring as opposed to threatening her with taking them away. So the reason I segued to that is because although the government, the county clamors about equity and diversity, I just don't see how government programs offer equity to anybody, considering it's everybody who is financing those government programs. the best way to help them is to let them keep their own equity, soften the blow on their pockets.
A lot I want to unpack with that. Brent is watching from your gym, literally watching the show here.
From his gym.
Yeah, from his gym, excuse me. You work out at his gym.
Yes, sir. Wonderful gym.
Brent, this is the second time in a week that Gracie has come up on the show. Chief Kachis brought up this gym. He works out there, Charlottesville Police Department. We have Neil Williamson from the Free Enterprise Forum watching the program. A ton of folks in Keswick. A ton of folks in Albemarle County North on our heat map. This is your voting block. So here's what I want to throw here. This guy is running. Let me see if I can unpack it. You're running on a platform that is about being fiscally conservative. I get the impression you're socially liberal.
Socially libertarian.
Okay. I get the impression that you're a small government guy.
Yes.
I get the impression that you are looking for incremental tax sources, economic development.
Yes.
To alleviate the tax burden on homeowners and to alleviate the tax burden on personal property. Because if we get incremental revenue from new tax sources, potentially we can jiggle with the real estate tax rate and either keep it the same or drop it a couple cents, which would keep more money in our pocket during a time of inflation and credit card debt being at an all-time high in America. Everything you're saying, I identify with 1,000%. I have to ask you specifically, what are the economic development ideas and plans that you have, the new sources of tax revenue here?
Well, so as I told you, I'm still learning a lot, so I don't have all the answers for that, but part of what I'm hearing from the multiple local business owners and developers that I know are, and I will parrot Mr. Pruitt last night, streamlining the buzzsaw process for development.
You're talking Michael Pruitt on yesterday's show?
On yesterday's show,
okay.
Which one thing he said, they talk about affordable housing. One thing to make housing affordable would be to streamline the process for development. It is a costly process for a developer to go through a 2-year situation in order to get something developed, which just drastically adds cost to the development in question. Between that, trying to find yourself to be a little more friendlier to businesses. Case in point, my dealership's been around for a long time. We have these little American flag pennants we fly to kind of get movement, to get people to look over at our dealership. Why? Because if they show up and they buy a car, that helps us bring in revenue, which that revenue helps us pay for our operational expenses and our county's taxes. One thing we had as a county employee stop by one day and let us know that in order to fly those, we have to pay for a 6-month permit to fly those. Why would you encumber my business with an extra expense just to try to generate revenue so that way I can turn around and send it to you guys at the times that it's being requested? Which my building alone, that's on just shy of $30,000 is what the increases have gone for. $30,000, I could give everybody in my organization a $1,000 a year raise.
That's a pretty good start for another salaried employee.
Exactly. Or it's a whole nother salaried employee or a whole nother employee in general. I would just try to find ways to be friendlier for businesses to open up. We're already in an economy that's so up and down. One thing they were touting is how they lowered the personal property tax rate, which that's wonderful, but considering vehicles increased 40%, the market on a used car increased 40%. The same car I was buying 3 years ago, I'm paying $2,000 more for on average. And then, they want to hammer us for having to pass on the increase in expense. Well, one thing I was just told, and it resonated well with me, is everything you buy has a government cost built into it. So the more we can lower that government cost, the better we can offer those services and goods to the public at a more affordable rate. Every rent has a built-in government cost for the taxes that are being paid, which, back to taxes, which, look, a lot of it is big on that. They talk about affordable housing. So not only was it a 13.4% increase over the countywide, which our district got hit with 15%, and some people have told me up to 20 to 30%, depending on the size of land they own. Which you got to remember, just because you own the land doesn't mean you have the money sitting around that it's worth. You're paying taxes on unrealized gains.
Amen.
And then when you sell it, you're going to have to pay a capital gains tax on top of that.
There it is.
So, But back to what I was getting to is 28.8% increase on multifamily homes. Those are supposed to be the most affordable places for people to live. They just got hit with almost a 30% increase. How are the landlords going to be able to help maintain an affordable rent whenever the county just hammered them with the hardest of increases? So to me, it looks a lot like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Mike Pruitt highlighted a lot of these points yesterday as well. I want you to, Mike Pruitt's watching now. Highlight what you thought from the Mike Pruitt interview. What'd you take? Everything.
So I like his concept of opening up the conversation of maybe expanding the growth area because, I'm not opposed to dense infill where it works, but again, if your dense infill is on a hillside, which being in the foothills of the mountain, you have a lot of that. We own a building right behind our dealership. There was an increase of almost $300,000, I believe, in the cost of building that building due to the retaining walls and the groundwork necessary to make it safe for it to be a site for a building. One thing I like is Mike is a younger gentleman. Nothing against older folks. They bring a lot of experience, but one thing I'm running on is transparency and bringing a new voice, a fresher perspective to the Board of Supervisors. Although I know we're probably stand on the opposite side of one another, I like the fact that he's a younger guy.
Where specifically?
So, I'm a very independent, moderate person. I'm fiscally conservative because, like you said, I'm for smaller government. One of the people who made Charlottesville so great was Thomas Jefferson. He was an anarchical capitalist. So that basically means somebody who can maintain their own self-governance or doesn't need some supreme overlord to dictate how their life is run. And he believed in free market and the fact of the growth and the abilities to maintain a healthy society with it. Now, education's not a big thing that we're in on, but I do think that our education, I think we need to strengthen education, and I think we need to strengthen households, regardless of how your household lives. A strong household is where you should be taught, what culture is about and how to be respectful of other people's culture. Education should be to teach you strong academics so that way we can have a civil society that can maintain these agreements amongst one another, whether we strongly disagree, but yet just need to maintain a civil society. That's the only way that contract will ever work, is smarter people and stronger households, which one thing that I see is it seems as if, the government looks like they would like to try to take over more of how we raise our families and involvement in our household.
All right, I got to jump in on that one.
To me, that's scary.
I got to jump in on that one. I'll highlight some of the folks watching. Liza Borges, hello. Dave Norris, hello. Welcome to the program. Herb Porter, Brittany Gray, who's running Fluvanna County School Board, hello. Johnny Ornelas, small business owner, Guadalajara and El Mariachi, hello. Amy Benson, Mooses by the Creek, hello. Thank you for watching. Catherine Lochner, Alex Erpe, CEO of Emergent Financial Services, hello. Maria Barnes giving you props. Logan Wells Claylow giving you props. Joyce Vinyas, sorry if I'm messing up your last name there, Joyce. Parents' rights. Youngkin yesterday, and I'm going to get out of your way. I'll set the stage, I'll set the table. You devour the main course, which is the question I'm throwing to you. And you can go anywhere you want here. I have an idea where you're going to go. Youngkin yesterday, new policy that shifted previous policy, now very much empowering parents when it comes to communication and transparency with their children, LGBTQ identifying in schools. This is a topic, and I don't think you will take this answer that Board of Supervisors only allocates the money to the school board, so this is only a school board topic. I don't think you'll take that because I think this is a topic and a question that everyone cares about right now. Where do you stand on parents' rights when it comes to education and the transparency and conversation opportunities that may be there or may not be there when it comes to kids and teachers?
Well, so consider I'm probably biased on this question, being a parent of 3 children. I do believe parents should have a right to know what's going on in their child's education. It goes back to this. We as a community fund all of these institutions. Why should we not have a say-so or at least a knowledge? Now, am I saying that I think a teacher should prematurely out their child? No. Am I saying that parents shouldn't be accepting to their children? One of my children were to come out to me, I would love them no less. I would embrace the difference. Again, I'm 41 years old. I have had a diverse group of friends my entire life. I respect the utmost of how people want to live their life. You know, we only get one turn around the sun. So enjoy it. Another reason why I'm pushing back on the taxes is because we're selling our lives for the money that is being pulled out of our pockets to fund these institutions. But I do believe parents should have a say in what their child's education looks like. You know, I do believe that education should be education. I think schools should be a safe place for all children, regardless of what their choices are. I would say that it would be a concern to know if there was certain indoctrination being pushed in to our school systems.
What's that mean?
You know, whatever political agenda that might be opposing to whatever yours is in your household. One of my constituents said it best. Your children should be raised to reflect your morals and values. She was actually one of the young ladies I met at a friend's get-together that signed my petition to help me get on the ballot as an independent candidate. You know, I'm very moderate. I'm not extreme one way or the other. I am a small government guy, which is why I lean into the softer taxes. Again, I think society should be more prepared to have more uncomfortable conversations. I don't think it's the government's responsibility to raise our children. I don't think it's the government's responsibility to indoctrinate our children regardless of whatever persuasion might be in that, you know, educator's mindset. I think the educator should show up and they should do their jobs. I think they should be well funded and have all the resources needed to do their jobs. One of the things I've heard is, you know, and you might have heard me state it, is the bloat of admin. If you look at it, and if I'm correct, now it's hard to find some of these counts, but if I'm correct, I did the math, I think it's 1,100 administrative employees versus 2,200 educators. It's like one administrator per every 7 teachers. Why are we paying so many people in the admin office? Why don't we pull some of that back, and that way we can disperse it to the teachers so they can get better pay and have better resources to not only bring the children who are struggling up to par, but also to challenge the ones who are exemplary. You know, I was an average student. I never thought, oh, there's the smart kids. Now, yeah, there were comments made, but it never hurt my feelings. They put in the effort and the work. They deserve the acknowledgement. I didn't. I was good with my hands. I like to build. I was a very social butterfly. I had a great group of friends. I focused on that more than I focused on my studies. So at the end of the day, you know, I am a parent. I want to know what's going on with my children. I make this loving joke. My children are the best thing that ever happened to me. They're the most expensive thing I've ever owned.
It's so true.
So as I invest into my children and their future and trying to send good people out into society, I want my public institutions to do what's best with our tax dollars, and that's teach academics and make sure our children are ready for it. Scott Morris, which you just had on, posted something today, and what he posted, which if you don't mind me scrolling through my phone, I know it's rude, but what Scott Morris posted was something I think is one of the most vital things. You know, I remember home ec, I remember shop class, I remember sewing. So my wife always says, oh, you can sew better than me. So you got to remember, I'm one of 9 children, but I was the youngest of 6 originally before my father's recent 3 children. Being the youngest of 6, I grew up with a lot of hand-me-downs, so I learned how to sew. Why? Because hand-me-downs come already threadbare, and you need to put them back together once you blow them out. And we used to play outside. We were a feral group of children. We would leave in the daytime, eat breakfast, we'd leave, and we'd come back when it was dark. We literally had a dinner triangle when I grew up in Texas out in the country. So that was one thing that, you know, was highly beneficial. For me, was being able to use my hands to make do with what we had. So Scott posted this: subjects that should be mandatory in schools, taxes. If people knew how taxes, I love when somebody says, well, that's government funded. And I said, actually, it's not. It's taxpayer funded. The government just spends it once they take it from us. Coding. That would be something great. I was part of my generation, we had computer lab. We went once a week. You know, nowadays my son carries a laptop to and fro. We probably have spinal issues from all the books we used to lug around. Cooking, insurance, basic home repair, self-defense, survival skills, social etiquette. That's a good one. Personal finance, public speaking, which I could have used more of because as I'm engaging and embarking on this campaign, that's something that I have to break the nerves away every time I show up to a public engagement. Car maintenance. Being in the auto industry, I've had people sit across from me as I'm going over the warranty and the terms and what's expected of maintenance and requirements, and you'll literally have younger folks look at you and say, there's oil in this vehicle? That's why YouTube's great. YouTube University. There's a guy on there, and he'll teach you how to change a tire, how to check oil, how to check fluids, how to do simple things. I think it's like for folks who grew up, which I grew up in a split household, my parents co-parented well. But folks who didn't have maybe that male role model to teach them that, there's a guy on YouTube that does great at educating people with small films on how to take care of these things. The worst is whenever you get somebody who blew their car up because they went 15,000 miles and never changed the oil, and then
Right.
you have to look at them and say, unfortunately, you're out of warranty, and that expense is now going to be yours. Not a good conversation to have, but one I've had frequently. And then the last one was stress management, because we're all like hamsters on a wheel just trying to make it all happen, which is one of the other reasons I was compelled to step up. Not that I have any shortage of life going on in my day-to-day. I mean, I'm 6 days a week at a business. I'm knocking on doors 3 to 4 days a week now. First time ever campaigning. I'm not a politician. First time going for political office. I'm hitting the ground running, and some days it's overwhelming. Luckily, I train jiu-jitsu, and I have other workouts. Yesterday I got home after training on a 12 o'clock class, and I ran 3.5 miles. That's a great way to blow off steam. I thank the pandemic for that, because as we were all sitting at home with nothing to do, I figured, hey, let me start doing something recreational for my health.
I like it.
And so, finding ways of stress management. My brother, and he's big into yoga. That's one thing I can recommend to everybody, regardless of how manly you are. Get out there and stretch. Don't be too macho to open yourself up to an idea that might be one of the best things that you ever signed up for. So
I love what you're saying here. I want to highlight some of the viewers and listeners: Jessica Ray, Zach Moore, Stephanie Easter, Matt Robinson, Susan Wire, Way Nix, Nick Halibo, Carlos Zamora. I mean, your crew's rising and shining right now on the TJ Fatally pages.
Lifelong friends.
If you have some questions, put it in the feed. I'll relay it live on air. Katie Pearl and Carly Wagner. I will get to your questions in a matter of moments. I'm going to ask a few of my own. We'll go rapid fire so we can cover as much topic material as possible. The comprehensive plan. 5% of Albemarle County allocated to commercial and residential development. Literally 5% in the comp plan for commercial and residential development. And not all of that 5% is even developable, because the topography, as he's highlighted already, does not allow it. I had Diantha McKeel in the chair literally right next to you, and I think I mentioned this yesterday to Mike Pruitt. Diantha McKeel said in this camera on that microphone, I am not in favor of expanding the 5% because right now the 5% is not at full capacity. And she highlighted the shopping centers on Route 29 and the vacancy rate on the shopping centers there, saying, why would we expand it when these shopping centers are not full capacity? Very straightforward question for you. What's your stance on the 5% developmental area, and whether you would expand it, vote yes, or vote no?
Well, so I've had multiple conversations on that as well, just trying to get up to snuff. I agree with Mr. Pruitt on the fact that I think a slight expansion would be necessary. One thing I will tell you that I've watched over the last 20 years is our infrastructure be overburdened by the infill. Unfortunately, they never planned to have so much infill on the infrastructure that you see. I mean, I watch traffic on 250 out in front of my dealership, gridlock, twice a day. And it all bottlenecks in, and there's no room to expand that to alleviate any of that. So although the infill is not fully in, you take things like Biscuit Run Park. I think that was a little under 1,200 acres. That's taken out of the 5% comp plan. So where is the addition for that expansion? I'm not saying we need to rip the cap off and just let it spew over, but I do think smart growth is something that I've heard. I think it's a conversation we really need to have take place. A slight expansion into that growth area on that comp plan would be great for alleviating some of the traffic congestion. It would be helpful to make affordable housing, as Mr. Pruitt was stating, which again, I like the concept of affordable housing as well. One of the reasons I'm running is so I can try to keep my house affordable for my family to stay in. It's a very multifaceted approach. If I saw correctly, I think I don't know if it was Sean Tubbs or Neil Williamson, which both of them
Neil's watching.
Hey, Neil, how's it going? I've had great conversations with him. He had come up with the lasagna plan, which I know I will blow that up if I try to preach it, but I would recommend, if you have him back on, to elaborate into that, because that was probably one of the more clever concepts I've heard. I've talked with multiple developers that I know personally, and one of the biggest gripes is the excessive cost for them to develop. I did see in one of their forums, it looked like, I think it might have been Sean Tubbs, who's another remarkable reporter and would have great insight on this stuff because they've had their ear to the ground so long. I think they were talking about is it Seminole Square behind Kmart?
Oh, yeah.
And the apartments that they were looking to put in there. I think that's a great idea, especially considering it looks like that shopping center is having a hard time to fill that large portion area. What a good place that's already got infrastructure built in that could handle it. Although, yes, but you figure it's right off of our largest byway, so the congestion that's already there is only going to be slightly increased. I think concepts like that are great as far as if you're looking for infill. There's a good place. Be limited site work. You've already got all the groundwork there. You've already got all of the utilities built in. That's another thing that hurts. The tap fee. If you're trying to build a development in the county, I think so. My father owns, in one of his holding companies, he owns about 8 rentals. There are 5 of them in the county. We had purchased one that had a lot that we were able to divide, and it was off Georgetown Road. Well, it was still on an old well. $7,000 then, and I think this is 5-6 years ago. $7,000 per tap fee per domicile.
It's gone up.
14,000, I think, is the last, if I can quote one of the other developers. 14,000. How can they create affordable homes?
There it is, right here.
If they're being hammered for $14,000.
I'll give you a really nice, buttoned up couple sentences that you can use on the campaign trail. Albemarle County right now, 24%, the cost of new construction. Building a single-family detached house, 24% of it is red tape and paperwork and permitting. So a $400,000 home, we're talking $100,000 is not bricks or sticks or granite or appliances or drywall. It is legitimately paperwork and permitting. Ask anyone in the county office, ask Neil Williamson about this. 24%, that would be a perfect one for what you're trying to say here.
So Jerry, I know all too well, like I told you, we built our house in 2017. So the same business partner that's in line with my father that helps him with the rehab and renovation and new construction on empty lots was the gentleman who built our home. He allowed me to do a lot of the general contracting work to help save me that 24%. I understand that all too well. Miles of red tape. And the worst is, and now look, I know developers are a little bit better off because they've done it for so long. But again, that process should still be streamlined for everybody. I showed up to the county office building, I could say at least 6 times. You come in, they tell you what you need, you bring that back, and then they tell you need this. Well, you should have had this before you brought this. Why didn't you tell me that out of one of the 5 times I was here? Why didn't you tell me that? Why didn't you say, oh, you're doing all this? Here you go. Here's a list of everything you're going to need. Go get all that together and show back up. So that way you could show back up with everything we need to pay for the $1,800 for your build permit. That's not counting the almost $10,000 out of pocket for the well, the septic. I'm on an alternative because of where I live. So that was another $25,000 increase in my septic system, which is great because, it's DEQ approved and it's one of the discharge systems. I understand all of that. I'm all for reasonable regulation. But it comes back to that, reasonable regulation, 100 grand extra can buy you a lot of house. Or you can have you can save a lot of money if they could cut that red tape and your developer could soften the blow on how much he's got to turn around and sell the house to you for to make profit.
There it is. Or rent the house if he's in the rental game. There it is. This guy is speaking common sense here. Comments we're going to get to here. This from Deep Throat, who's watching in Bozeman, Montana. A Charlottesville native in Bozeman now. He says it's refreshing to hear an actual local small business owner getting into leadership as opposed to the flood of no skin in the game activists that we get in the city. And he also says, we're on a great show with shows lately. Thank you kindly. And he says, TJ gets it. You cannot just say YIMBY yay infill and ignore infrastructure. The city of Charlottesville should listen to this guy. Ginny Who on Twitter says, I wish I could vote for this guy. I have dozens of commenters talking about voting for you right now, TJ. I want to get to comments. And if you guys have a question for TJ, put them in the feed and I will relay them live on air to TJ. You have a TV station and a newspaper watching you right now. Katie Pearl, this is for you, your question. It's refreshing to hear from a small business owner with employees and a family who is also going through the struggles that many in Albemarle County are experiencing. I'm glad he's running, and we need more people like TJ Fatally running in Albemarle County. Amen. I'll say Carly Wagner's comment now. Carly Wagner says, I bet nearly 99% of Albemarle County residents would have rather seen that $58 million used to build a northern high school in Albemarle County instead of on the 400 and some acres for the spy stations. She also says they already own the land. They don't it's across, she says, from Brook Hill, and we need a high school in the northern feeder system. She talks about capital investments in schools and then forking over that kind of money to a private developer. I also want to highlight this. Neither TJ nor I are throwing any shade on Wendell or United Land Corp. They're in the business of keeping a business in the black. What Wendell did is completely fair game. I think the point TJ's making is prioritization of taxpayer funding, and was that the best use of it? I think the point TJ is making is, did they overpay and truly do their due diligence, or was this a rush closing and a rush deal done out of emotion? I think that's he's making. And I think the point he's also making is transparency and communicating with all of taxpayers that this was going to happen, as opposed to springing it upon us, and then once it was sprung upon us, to steal your phrase, there's not a doubt in my mind they were looking for props and a pat on the back from there. That's exactly what that play was. Anywhere you want to go on any of this?
Well, and I agree. So look, as I complain to people who had to listen, my employees, my older brother, who's been a great example of how I've patterned my life, looked at me and said, well, stop complaining to us. What are you going to do about it? So here I am, trying to get out and make a little bit of a change. I think I said before the show, one of my favorite phrases was a Buddhist statement that said, you can tend to the garden you can reach. So again, here I am trying to see if I can't help shape local policy to make the community a little bit more palatable for my children to stick around in the future if that's their choice. I agree, and again, no shade to Wendell Wood. Hats off to him. Realistically, I think one of the ways they could have negotiated with him is possibly give him some sort of sunsetting tax incentive that would have made him want to sell that land a little bit better.
Talk to us about that. This is creative here.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and I don't have all of it. It's one of those conversations I would love to have, but you figure you give this man an incentive. Think of the amount of money that he has paid in through the 4 decades, if I'm correct, of development in our community and the shaping in our community, the jobs he's brought, the economic impact that he has brought, the amount of insane tax revenue, not to mention property taxes that I'm sure he has paid on all of the land he has held for years that the county has graciously spent, but the insane amount of revenue and economic drive he has brought to this community. Soften the blow for him. Give him some sort of sunsetting tax break that would have made it lucrative for him to want to have negotiated a better deal for the county or taxpayers' funding, in my opinion. Give him some sort of break. I mean, we all know, I'm sure he has paid in a fair share to the system. So
Probably more so than anyone in Albemarle County history, probably.
I would agree strongly. So give the man a break. Make it lucrative for him to where he would want to soften his price tag. Again, hats off to him. I would really like to shake his hand because I think he's probably one of the strongest negotiators. And my father, in my opinion, which is one of my best friends.
Which he's pretty damn good too.
My father is one heck of a businessman.
Yeah.
And I have told him to his face, I think you don't hold a candle to Mr. Wendell Wood in this situation. But again, it comes back to just...
I'm not sure Thomas Jefferson holds a candle to Wendell Wood.
It comes back to being comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. You know, I'm thankful for UVA. I believe UVA has been one of the best insulators for our community through, I've seen the recession, you know, with my father. I've seen this COVID impact. UVA is the number one employer, aside from what we've now found out, is the defense sector. And not casting shade to UVA because I wouldn't want them to go anywhere, but you figure they're one of the largest landholders in the county.
Yeah.
They're tax exempt. The more they buy up these neighborhoods, the harder it is for people that have been in these neighborhoods for 20, 30 years to stay in these neighborhoods, or generations to stay in these neighborhoods. The more land they own, which they're the largest land bank holder we have, the less tax base we have, or the less space we have for taxable businesses.
So is this a segue into a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, if you are elected to Albemarle County Board of Supervisors? He's running against B. Lepisto Kirtley. We're going to know the first Tuesday in November. If you're elected, would you push a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes program where you use essentially your political influence? Michael Payne is all for this in Charlottesville and City Council. So here's another potential leverage play for you, or a platform point for you. I'm a junkie for this kind of politics stuff. You could form a JV, a joint venture with Michael Payne, and pool political resources, Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, and Charlottesville City Council. I'll tag Michael Payne. He watches our shows. And you guys go Board of Supervisors and City Council to UVA together, and you leverage the power of PR and public perception, and you put it in the news cycle, use a platform like this to your advantage, and you say, UVA, you have all this land that is tax exempt. You need to pony up with some kind of large chunk to Albemarle County and to the city of Charlottesville to help alleviate the tax burden on residents. Would you do that?
I would not be opposed to doing that. Again, I don't have all the answers for that. Those are conversations I would be thrilled to have with folks. I would love to reach out to Michael Payne, because when I win this seat in November, I would love to be able to have that kind of relationship with the city. You know, one thing that I would love to push is the revenue sharing agreement, which, if I'm correct now, annexing county limits is no longer feasible. So I think last year we sent $15 million to the city, which, by the way, has the larger portion of the businesses in our county. So why are we sharing county revenue with a city that has more economic revenue coming in? To me, that, you know, but then again...
What could you do with the rev share agreement, though?
I don't have an answer for that, to be honest. It's something I've only looked into a little, you know, just a little, but to me it's mind-blowing. Now, this is an agreement that was written whenever I was born, so I would have to date back. And to segue back to Michael Pruitt, I think zoning is an issue as well. I'd like to have some more conversations and see a little bit more on the development of better zoning in certain situations to make it more palatable for developers. Again, that leads back into affordable housing.
So are you pro upzoning in Albemarle County?
I don't know much about it. I do know that I'm not pro HOA, and if your neighborhood is forming an HOA so you can soften the blow for upzoning, I think upzoning doesn't sound like a great idea, because HOAs are necessary, but they are also another burden. You watch this show,
don't you?
I do watch your show.
You watch the show.
And look, if I don't catch it live, I always save it so I can catch it later whenever I'm on my run or something like that.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate you bringing information, local information. You know, like your segments on Kotchkus. I think he showed up in a real hard situation, and I think I agree with you. I think he's done a great job.
You're talking police chief.
Yes, indeed. I believe he's done a great job. I know some of the guys I train with are very happy to be in his department nowadays. To where I also train with guys from local surrounding area law enforcements, and they left before he showed up due to the fact they didn't feel supported in their industry.
Dude, you are crushing this interview right now. Judah, is this guy not? I mean, look
For
at
a
Judah.
guy that
He
was
is-
nervous showing up,
Dude, you are crushing this interview right now. I mean, folks, viewers and listeners, blow up his phone, give him some props, give him some thank you. Can we keep going with you?
I mean, I'm okay. Look, I run a family business. They know where I'm at. So I
Okay,
don't
they're
think
watching you right now. I'm seeing the heat map.
Most likely, my younger brother is busy getting stuff done while I'm out. So
Okay.
I thank him. I hope he's not watching. I hope
think
he's
they're
making
watching.
money.
I think they're watching. All right, I'm going to throw this to you here. This is a very straightforward question. School rebranding. Meriwether Lewis Elementary. Meriwether Lewis Elementary. We had a father that was on the name consideration committee. It was called a name consideration committee. This is a military veteran. He gets on the name consideration committee, and he finds very quickly what he volunteered for, a name consideration committee, was not that. Instead, it was a name changing committee. The committee followed the surveys that were filled out by parents at Meriwether Lewis Elementary. And over, I'll be conservative with my estimate because I don't have the data in front of me. My memory's pretty damn good though. I would say over 85% of the parents surveyed at Meriwether Lewis Elementary said, don't change the name, everything is fine and dandy. The name consideration committee, I'm using air quotes for those that are listening and not watching, said the surveys don't want us to change it, and it's an overwhelming majority. Then the name consideration committee votes democratically not to change the name. Then the superintendent and the superintendent's office get involved. And Dr. Haas and his cabinet come back to the name consideration committee and said, yeah, you misunderstood what you volunteered for. This is actually a name changing committee, and we're going to change it. Then they made them watch a video on DEI. Then they changed the vote from open, raising your hand for what you're voting for, to keep it in on the DL and write it on a tiny slip of paper where only the superintendent's cabinet could see the results. Then the school name was changed. School rebranding, Albemarle County, anywhere you want to go.
So, Jared, thank you for that question. That's a lot to unpack. Again, I watched the Meg Bryce show. One of the things she stated is that whenever she had requested the amount of funds allocated for those rebranding, she got these fragmented, broken up answers. They couldn't really give her an actual just line by line breakdown. You asked me, look, I'm not from the Nerf generation, right? We used to, and I don't recommend this for any young folks at home, we used to have BB gun wars. I played paintball for years. We rode our bikes, we made reckless jumps, things like that. I think
you and I are lucky to be alive, what we did as kids,
yes.
right? Yeah.
I think the concept of rebranding a school due to the fact of somebody who might have had a great positive impact, but also had some negative stuff in their history, I think wasting current funding on rebranding schools, I think those funds would have been better giving teachers resources and funds they needed. Again, I don't need you to take my money for some feel-good policy. I need you to take my money and I need you to allocate it and be diligent with how you're spending it. Like I said at the top of the show, government is unlike any other business. They're not in the business of making money. They're in the business of taking money. They should definitely be diligent on how they're spending it. I have a lot of customers who work for the school system, and one of them made a statement to me. It said, Matthew Haas would not have ever let any of, when he was a teacher, he wouldn't have been for anything that he is allowing to take place in his school system. And again, not saying that our county and our schools don't have a lot of great things going on, but like anything, they can always use a tightening up. Me and my father run our budget on a regular basis to see where our waste is and where we can tighten up. I think Brad Rickles said it in an article I read.
This is the Crozet candidate challenging Ann Malik, who's running for her 5th term. If she wins her 5th term, that would be 20 consecutive years for one person running Albemarle County, one of 6. She would be on the board for 20 straight years. She's 4 terms in. This would be her 5th. Brad, I've had many people reach out to me about you coming on the show. In fact, anybody of any political persuasion could come on this program. I just want this to be the water cooler of Charlottesville and Central Virginia. Even if we disagree, we can disagree in a respectful way where we can have a conversation and folks can learn from us. That's literally all I'm trying to do here. You were talking Brad.
Well, yeah, so I was reading an article, which I've met Brad. He's a great fella. I think he's a very strong candidate, another independent. He's got a lot of expertise. One of the things he stated in this article was working for the government as long as he has. Unfortunately, government budgets don't have a light item that say government waste. So, I would like to be in those meetings as an advocate for people whose money we are appropriating to wherever it's going. So that way I can look for the waste as the budget process coming in. I've had people tell me, and I've seen my competitor question about the budget surplus that sits in the balance to budget fund. Now, if I'm correct, and I've heard a lot about AAA bond ratings, and as somebody who runs a dealership that specializes in subprime financing, I understand the necessity for sound credit, especially for a large entity like Albemarle County that is going to have to borrow money for some of their capital improvements. Not trying to tear down on the AAA bond rating that I've heard, but I think it's 2% of the budget is what you have to keep in that balance to budget fund in order to maintain that bond rating. I've heard estimates of close to $60 million sitting in that balance to budget fund. Now, I think I looked at the budget before I left here. The expenditures are about $546 million. So if I'm correct, that's about $13 million. So there's a large swath of taxpayers' dollars in there that hopefully are being leaned into using for things like the Northern Feeder, or as Mr. Pruitt said, the Southern Feeder high schools that are going to be necessary, or infrastructure expansion for classrooms. I would be really interested to see the student counts, to see, if it's a possibility of just maybe expanding the school's footprint, or, possibly if we need to expand and build a new school. These are things that we're going to need.
How about school bus drivers?
That's another one there. I have a great client that is a bus driver. Look, I have solar on my home. I was able to afford it. One of the dirty little secrets is the tax breaks that we got for our solar are typically funded by lower and middle income people that can't afford to put solar on their home. I love renewables where they work. I know it's a dirty word, but I think one of the best zero-emission energy providers, especially if we're looking to charge a bunch of EVs and electric buses that I've heard, would be nuclear. If you have an aircraft carrier that can go off the shore for 15 years and not have to come back because it has its own power generation on board, I think the Navy's got it down. I think we could do, 30-year plants that we could revisit to see what they might need. I know outside of Houston, they have carbon capture natural gas plants, which if you ask any solar installer, I've had them tell me this. When the bell curve hits in solar and it's not producing energy, what sustains the grid? Typically natural gas. If you got areas where you don't get sun, you don't get wind, and they're burning coal, why not retrofit those plants with some sort of natural gas carbon capture? Because there is a company, Net Zero, out of Carolina, has 2 plants outside of Houston, and they're about 30 megawatt plants. Now, I know the county's got this 200-acre solar farm, which would produce that same amount of power as I think a 5 to 10 acre natural gas plant that runs. So the plant burns the natural gas, and then it captures the carbon, and the plant itself runs off the carbon. It is a net zero plant. They have 2 of them outside of Houston that are currently operational, I think, for the last couple years. Why aren't we pouring more money in research and development into elaborating that until we can get to a point of sustainability? One thing that I look at is renewables are great, but look at the impact. So I read an article a long time ago that says a Toyota Prius, by the end of its life cycle, had the same impact as a Ford F-150. Between the mining and strip mining, because if you look at Luckstone where they pull the gravel out, that used to be a mountain. Okay,
so I drive by that every day.
When you're pulling lead, when you're pulling cobalt, when you're pulling all of these things, which a lot of them are being sourced very unethically, you're destroying ecosystems and environment to where you're destroying the environment to save the environment. To me, I think, and I know it's a very multifaceted approach, so I don't claim to have all the answers. I just think nobody wants to sit down and have the conversations to try to find a middle ground of what the best sustainable way to get to where we need to be. So I will give props to B. I was at one of the work sessions for CAT, and the gentleman, Mr. Williams, who runs it, seems like a very knowledgeable guy.
And by B, he means B. LaPisto
Kirtley. She was the one person who made mention about liquid natural gas buses, right? First and foremost, if you look at the buses, I was told by a gentleman on his morning runs how many empty buses he sees. First and foremost, why wouldn't you maybe shift those large buses to 16-passenger buses that would be a little bit more economical and a little bit less impact on emissions, and then run the big buses in the higher rate routes? They should have all that information. They have plenty of research into it. So B actually made mention about liquid natural gas instead of diesel buses. I think his name is Garland Williams. Sorry if I got that wrong, but Mr. Williams made mention to the last authority he worked at, they had those LNG buses. They had less emissions, and they were one of the more dependable buses than the diesel versions, as opposed to they're trying to invest in hybrid buses. Now, another thing I heard at that same work session is if you see the trolley out on 29, that means one of those hybrid buses is in the shop. So anytime you see the WHO bus out on 29 running a normal route, that means one of the hybrid buses has not gotten there. Not to mention they cost twice as much. Heard the same thing from a school bus driver. The county currently has electric or battery-powered school buses that can typically barely make it through the one route before they need to show back up to be recharged. And again, they cost 2 to 3 times more than your normal buses. So I'm not saying that we should not invest in reducing our impact. Just saying we shouldn't pull the carpet out from underneath us until we get to a better point of sustainability with those models.
I think he's talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater right there.
Yes, I agree
which
there.
Very well said. I'll throw a couple more to you. I can already tell your wife is amazing. She is saying
best thing ever happened to me.
She goes, this man comes home every day after serving the community and sits for hours just writing personal notes, thanking the people in our community just for hearing him out. He cares so much and he works so hard. Yes, Jerry, he watches this show while writing these notes. Thank you for the shout out. It's easy to be behind my loving husband. I love that. I love that, Chelsea.
Thank you, baby.
Scott Aaronworth, the attorney in Virginia Beach with ties to the University of Virginia, says, does TJ have a daughter? Because I think he just made a Taylor Swift reference with the all too well comment he did earlier. Is that a Taylor Swift reference? You do have a daughter.
It very well could be. I do have a daughter, Stella. She's 9 years old.
So maybe the Taylor Swift is creeping into the subconscious over there of the candidate. So I'll ask specific questions here as we wind down, about 10 more minutes with TJ, and then we got a client coming in that's going to help us keep the lights on. This is what I'll throw to you. You are running against an incumbent. She's had one term. She has name recognition. I'll also cut to the chase. Albemarle County, as we both know, leans Democrat. There's a lot of track record that would suggest. In fact, I think the last Republican to serve on the board was Ken Boyd. Ken Boyd in the Rio District. You're running as an independent. Talk to me about the choice to run as an independent. Why an independent? Talk to me about what you feel of the Republican Party. Has it changed? Do you still identify with aspects of it or it at all? You and I are the same age here. I've voiced my opinions on both parties, how they've become caricatures of their former selves, and I think a lot of that is because of social media, but I want to hear your thoughts. Why run as an independent?
Well, I will parrot exactly what you just said there. At social media and the modern age of communication, which, as we talked about before the show, I think face-to-face in person is the best way to communicate. Social cues are a big thing you miss on a keyboard. The loudest 10% have got the platforms to amplify themselves to where that 80% in the middle of the road, I mean, we're just out here left to dry. Again, I grew up outside of Dallas, and the community I was in was fairly conservative. It was a dry county up until 5-6 years after I left. I've been in Charlottesville for over 26 years. I pride myself on this wonderful little cottage community that we got, this college community we got in here. you have such a diverse group that is embracing to where running as an independent was fairly simple. There are things on both angles that I would agree with. I agree with you that I don't think neither party really represents their former self. One of the greatest statements I heard is, the Democrats always say, oh, we want to stomp out poverty, and the Republicans say, we want to stomp out bureaucracy, and neither of them have done anything but escalate both of those situations, if you ask me. To where I said it, I'm very moderate. I'm in the middle of the road. I think legalization of cannabis was one of the better things. That took people who were being penalized and scrutinized, just responsible consumers, just like if you're going to go have a beer. Why can't somebody responsibly consume at home? Why have we not created a system to where we can regulate and tax that, which would make it a safer environment for those folks? Not to mention it takes people out of penal systems for simple possession. I think for-profit prisons are a terrible thing. I've had family members who've struggled with substance abuse and have been incarcerated. I don't think an addict, a reoccurring addict, should be imprisoned. I don't think you should have for-profit prisons. If you can have a for-profit prison, I think you should have for-profit rehabilitation. I don't think you should have to have some expensive health insurance policy in order to be able to get into one of these programs. I think people should, if you can send somebody away for 6 months to incarcerate them for a small infraction, you should be able to send them away for 6 months to help them get clean. Then you might send them back out to the tax base, and now they're a productive member of society again.
Well said.
So I'm very middle of the road. Again, I'm very to each his own. I will be a great neighbor, regardless of how you live. Look, as long as you're not harming women, children, and animals, live your life, man.
There you go.
Live your life. That's the way we grew up. Again, I have friends from all walks of life, and I celebrate that. I love them all for their individuality. That's why I think an independent was the right choice, especially in a heavy blue county, because I don't want the baggage coming from one side or the other. I truly have independent thought. I am a free-thinking, critical thinking person, and I'm a proponent for smaller government. I think there's a lot of waste in these what I'm coming to find, these humongous budgets that seem to be captivated out of our pockets. So.
Dude, you and I, and anyone who watches this program knows that I am no longer involved in this election cycle, and I was very straightforward in that our youngest just was not sleeping for 7 months and change. So while we had the green light prior to the birth of our child this past November, the past 7-8 months have been really challenging. But you and I would have been a formidable tandem on this election cycle, TJ. I'll throw this to you. We talked about this off air. I think what you're saying is going to resonate with so many people, okay? But you're a business guy, so you think both sides. What could happen and what might also happen. So I think you have a hell of a shot of winning this race. I've said it on the show, the two most competitive races are going to be your race against Lepisto Kirtley and Bryce against Spillman. I think the other races, and I'm just being a straight shooter here, political science, I'm not trying to throw shade, I don't think the other races are going to be competitive, okay? I think it's you and Lepisto Kirtley and Bryce and Spillman and on the school board. What happens if you don't win? Have you thought about it? Have you put a scenario together?
Well, of course. One of my favorite sayings is triple A's of life that was given to me by a good buddy: adapt, adjust, and accommodate. Because, there's no set plan in anything. Of course, my logic is I'm going to win this seat. That's what I'm running for. That's why I'm spending all the countless hours away from my family, just to see if I can make an impact or improve. If I don't win, I know I'll come back as a stronger competitor on the next cycle.
There you go.
Where maybe at that point in time we can run
do it together
simultaneously.
With a ticket. I would love that.
But of course, I'll deal with that November 8th.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm winning the seat.
Respect.
So,
well said.
And one thing, if I can give a little props to my father, one of the best things he's ever instilled in me is there's no such thing as a problem, only an opportunity to succeed. That's the way I like to look at life, Or to be cheesy and quote Bruce Lee, if you're going to be anything, be like water. Water becomes what it is. When it runs into the path of resistance, it finds a way around. If you pour it in a cup, it becomes the cup. At the end of the day, I am open for the celebration of diversity of thought. I'm open-minded to having conversations that might be counter to my own, intuition. There are certain convictions that I am 100% married to, like being true and faithful to my honest wife and standing behind my children until my dying day. But, I'm not 100% married on certain ideas, or I'm not 100% against coming up to some sort of trade-off. Exactly.
Yeah.
Reasonable trade-offs. There's no such things as solutions, only reasonable trade-offs, and again, it comes back to those come to uncomfortable conversations to come up with the solutions that are needed for people to be happy with the way that their local government's running. That's why I'm out here and I'm on this campaign trail, and as you'll see me in the next months to come, I've been out knocking doors 4 days a week. So if you see me, I hope you have something that you can give me that I can take back to represent on behalf. Again, I want to be that guy in the room for the people who don't have the time to keep their ear to the ground to see how their money's being spent. I want to be the advocate for taxpayers so that way you can have a normal voice. One thing I tell people at the doors is I want to put a normal voice back on the Board of Supervisors. I don't think there's representation on behalf of us. One of the statements, that was made at the May 5th meeting where they did not equalize the rate, but they voted to keep it the same was, by the incumbent that I'm running against was, people were upset about the increases, but they understood how the money was being spent. The doors I'm knocking on, they disagree with that statement. They don't feel the benefit or the return on investment in their pockets, or in their lives. They do feel the hit on their pockets, but they don't feel the increase or the quality of life improvements or the return on investment that the county is selling in these budget presentations. Staffing is pretty heavy nowadays. If you look at the last 10 years, I think it's about 75 more employees for the county. HR in 2 years went from 3 people to 15 people. That increased their operational expense by $1 million. Rebranding of schools is a just blatant waste. You're not changing history by changing that name. Not to mention, as Meg Bryce said, Virginia Murray was an African-American lady that this school was named after, who was an example of what to be in a trying time. I could only imagine. So why are we squandering our money for these feel-good policies, as I said it, You're wasting valuable resources that could be allocated to improve our educators' lives, to improve the conditions they're working in, to pay bus drivers more without taking so long to do it, so kids can get to school and show up and not miss a lot of learning that we're paying for as well. One of my big keys, and back to your question, if I don't win this seat, one thing I would like to at least point out is, remember everybody, we fund every dollar that goes into these systems. So become active. That's what I did. I got tired of complaining about it to people who had to listen. I figured I'd go out and take the lumps and bruises, which thanks to my training at Gracie, if I could throw another plug in, one thing that's taught me is how to put myself in an uncomfortable position. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to, and all I ask is come to me face to face. That's how I prefer it. I don't like backstabbing. I don't talk about people behind their back. I make sure to state it to them because I want them to know it. Otherwise I don't make a statement at all. But I know there's lumps and bruises. I know there's going to be mudslinging, and I'm okay with that. That's the position I'm signing up for.
Yeah.
All I ask is please come to me with whatever you might have. I would love to have that conversation. Civil discourse, I believe, is something we're losing in this society anymore. Back to, social media. Keyboards have taken, Mike Tyson said it best. A lot of these people online forgot the fact that they could get punched in the face for the way that they say some of these statements.
That's right.
In my 20 years of customer service, which, I think will help bring a lot to the seat that I'm going after, my 20 years in customer service, one thing I've always learned is the customer on the phone is the biggest bully in the world, but when they get face to face, we usually have a very amicable conversation, and we can typically come up with a solution that everybody can live with. I'd like to get back to that. Just because, again, it's something that we're losing here, Transparency, closed-door sessions, behind-door government. Doesn't work for me. You know, we're funding it. We should know what you're doing. As I was getting into with the campaigning, you know, direct mailers are cheap enough. We could send a quarterly newsletter out to every district on what's going on with their tax dollars, what we plan to propose, the date the town hall will be for them to come have the public discussion. Shouldn't be election time and you dust off time to go have town halls. You should have a town hall every 6 months, or if every 3 months if you're up to it. You should have an annual state of the district from every supervisor, you know, and you shouldn't just have to advertise one time in 30 days for the possibility of a public forum for the tax rate.
Especially in a publication that no one reads, that now has a $50 a month paywall that's being circulated by the post office, and it's coming 3 days late when it's supposed to come on Tuesday. You get it on Friday, the Thursday on Sunday, and the Sunday on Tuesday.
So Jared,
what the heck?
You articulated that way better than I believe I could have, but I agree, you know. With the excessive funds that the county seems to pull out of our pockets, I think they could easily send a quarterly newsletter, or they should send 3 notices of the public debate for tax.
I mean, let's cut to the chase. They're doing a really good job of sending the bill in June and December for us to pay our assessments.
They never skip that one.
We don't skip that one, and we all get it.
Exactly.
They could easily do the same kind of concept with the quarterly newsletter.
Not to mention, there are plenty of printing companies in town that I believe would be very happy to have some of their revenue and some of ours back in their pockets to send those out.
And you could probably do it through a sunset tax program. That was another one of TJ's ideas right
there.
Hey,
look, you know, one thing I heard in CACs, so real quick, CACs, I was listening to Brad Rickles' podcast, Rhymes with Pickle, remember that? Okay. Brad Rickles' podcast about the Rivanna Village CAC. So if you listen to the gentleman who was the chair of that CAC, the reason they all got up and resigned, which I go to the CACs and they tell you about the staff proposals, and you can make comments like I asked about how is Martha Jefferson tax exempt, such a large campus. That kind of got blown off and they moved on to the staff proposal. But the Rivanna Village CAC chair, they all resigned and walked out because they were being bullied by their supervisor about pushing back against the proposals that they are supposed to be putting input in the community committee that is supposed to be advising on that input. How do you preach on your website about community engagement, but whenever your community wants to engage, you push back on them because you don't like the fact they're pushing back against your staff proposals, which, by the way, 65% of those people commute to this county to work. And again, I'm not opposed. I've had great interactions with a lot of our staff, and I believe in well-paid, efficient staff because we have to be competitive in that. Well-paid, efficient staff, though, is where I bring it down. You know, first responders should never have to work a second job. Teachers should never have to struggle to be able to live in a community that they're teaching in. Like, these are simple things. And I know, look, it sounds much easier said than done, but I'd like to get in there and see if I can't help persuade those policies to make that a possibility.
I sincerely mean this. You are welcome back anytime. He just hit a grand slam. Dude, this guy crushed it. I mean, this is one of the best interviews we've ever done. This was 90 straight minutes without commercial break, taking questions from folks and asking very straightforward, pointed, specific questions. He handled those questions admirably. He is running against B. Lepisto Kirtley. I encourage B. Lepisto Kirtley to come on the program. I'm an equal opportunity interviewer. Regardless of political persuasion. I would also love to host a live debate like we did with Steve Harvey and Ann Malik, and that debate between B. Lepisto Kirtley and TJ Fadley. You will get questions in advance, and then there will be one question that I asked that you do not know about, and we could even take a question or two from the viewing audience as well. All we're trying to do is offer transparency of communication when it comes to local government, because when communities know what's happening in local government, that education creates engagement, gets us more engaged, and keeps us more informed to what's happening. I sincerely mean this, dude. You were dynamite today.
Well, thank you.
How can they find you?
So the best way to find me would be on my website, everybodyvotestj.com. I also just bought tjforsupervisor.com, so either one of those two will send you out. Any support would be greatly appreciated. It is an uphill battle for me to try to win this race, so that way I can represent on behalf of the people in my district. So volunteers, contributions, all of that is very welcome. This race will definitely get much more expensive as we progress towards November. I would be up for an open debate, and I plan
Figured
to
you
be
would.
back on your show multiple more times. I thank you, the great host, great source of local information.
Thank you.
You know, just to kick back to one more thing, in my announcement speech, the Daily Progress wrote an article, which Hal Spencer did a great job, and I thank him for that. You know, the chair of the Almar Democratic Party made a mention to, she thought Bee had done a great job for her constituents in representing everybody in her district, which again, a lot of the people I have conversations with would disagree. But she said in that same statement that incumbents run off of their record and challengers run off of promises they intend to keep. That's not what I'm doing. I'm actually running off of her record. Her record is that she's never seen a tax increase that she hasn't voted for. I would just like to put an average person's perspective back into how deep they continue to go into our pockets. So, you know, again, I plan to be on the show multiple more times, Jerry, and I really appreciate you and Judah for hosting me today. Coming in, I was a bag of nerves. At the end of this, you'd make me feel like a rock star, which I'll bust a bubble on the way out the door. But yes, sir, and I really appreciate the exposure and what you do for the community.
Thank you, guys. TJ Fatally, boys and girls, he just crushed it. That's the program. Tomorrow at 12:30, Mayor Lloyd Snook, Mayor City of Charlottesville, Lloyd Snook. Excited to feature him and catch up on the new city manager and all things Charlottesville City related and Albemarle County related. We will bring up the revenue sharing agreement tomorrow with Mayor Lloyd Snook. When you see TJ Fatally, give him props. Blow up his phone, see him in person, give him dap, you know, high five, a hug, however you want to give him some props. Dude just hit a grand slam. For Judah Whitcower and for TJ, my name is Jerry Miller, and this is the I Love Seville show. 92 minutes straight of content without stopping, and it's all about Central Virginia. Thank you for joining us. So long. He's going to tell us when the mics are off and then when the cameras are off, so we're still on.